Welcome into the Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner, Derek Piper at State Farm Center, and we just witnessed a no good, very bad night for Illinois athletics. It included Illinois basketball blowing a 16-point first half lead and not scoring over the final 8:29, missing their final 19 shots, including a lot of threes that they chucked up as Michigan State out-toughs them and wins 79-65, 15-0 run to end this game. That was a terrible performance by Illinois in the final 30 minutes of this one. We'll dive into all the details there, but we also got to talk about mishap with the banner. They fixed it now. We're looking at Terrence Shannon Jr.'s banner hanging. It's supposed to be a great night, and Illinois pulled this off great with Io DeSumo and Kofi Coburn, but as he unfurls it, it's upside down. And it was just an embarrassing moment. It should have been a moment where everyone had this huge roar and everyone gasped. And I know it's not the way they wanted it to go, and Josh Whitman, kudos to him. The Illinois athletics director came out, addressed the issue, and said it's being addressed. And there were some really tough conversations with some people in this building, but just a terrible night, Derek, an embarrassing night on a couple fronts for Illinois basketball. So go ahead. Where do you want to start?
I tried to see if I could get my camera to be upside down to start this thing. I couldn't figure it out. We need somebody to help us out there. But yeah, this thing was bungled, and it had the setup to be special. And one of the more memorable nights in recent memory at this building, when you have the sellout and you have Izzo here, you know what he's playing for on their side. You got the rematch factor, which, look, there's a lot of friction. Maybe it is. I would say it's probably two-sided after, seeing Sparty Twitter over the last month or so in response to Brad complaining about the refs and KJ and everything like that. But this has been a highly anticipated rematch and had like game of the year vibes as far as in terms of Illinois and coming to this building, the game of this season here. Obviously, Tennessee was one of those too. And kind of the broader thing for me is like they just stink at these marquee home games. That if you look over the last 4 seasons, ever since the post the 1 seed year after Io DeSumo's exit, even the Big Ten title winning season with Trent and Kofi and that group, lost at home to Arizona and lost in double overtime here to Purdue. So I looked it up. In the past 8 times you face a top 15 team here in the past 4 seasons, you're 2-6. So that's one thing that, for whatever that reason is, and not to say that it's necessarily the same thing, but they failed to get it done. This one was in drastic, just nightmare scenario, just to not score a point in 8.5 minutes down the stretch to, that really overshadowed what's been a not very good Illinois defense here recently. The analytics continue to slide, and you look over the last month, they're pretty much looking like what we were staring in the face late last season, which is a very efficient offense. Yes, no, not in closing time.
That's final 8.5, yeah.
No. And a defense that's outside the top 100 in the last month. So there's a lot to look at there. It was a good ball game. It was back and forth, and but Illinois had a 16-point lead on their home court with the environment, with Terrence in the building, and then just really lost steam going into the half. And then you got the jersey thing, and then you can't slow Sparty down, and then you just – nobody goes 8.5 minutes with that kind of a performance. I know it's been done before, but geez, that was brutal. That was just couldn't believe what you're watching.
Yeah, when they overturned the KJ goaltend, that was a bucket. It was like that was a huge moment because it's like, oh, they finally got downhill, got to the rim. I didn't get to see a replay of that, by the way, but they finally got downhill. I tweeted, Derek, with 13:29 left. Illinois is in the bonus. Can they take advantage of it? They had done such a good job of drawing fouls. They weren't defending anybody in the first part of the first or second half, but they were getting downhill and drawing fouls. Will Riley creating for Merez Johnson, Kasper Sakshonis getting to the rim and finishing, and then they just stopped. They started chucking threes. They missed their final, how many threes? 10 threes of the game, and 10 of their final 19 shots are from three. There's a lot of mid-range jumpers involved there. I know they missed some open shots, but get to the free throw line. I'm obsessed with free throws with this team because I saw it with Terrence Shannon Jr., who's here tonight, like what those points add up to at the end of a game, and it just keeps you afloat when you're not making shots. And I don't know if they got tired. I just think they settled, and we're trying to, win that way when what was getting you all these points early in the second half was getting to the foul line. And this team falls in love with threes too much. They're not good enough at it to do it. Ben Rickhouse, I thought he rebounded unlike anybody else in the front court tonight. Merez wasn't very good on the glass until late. Tommy had a terrible game. I just thought he was out tough the entire game. Jackson Kohler goes for 23 points, and Merez was part of that too. The front court struggled, but they didn't make any shots. Tommy 0 for 4. And, obviously Ben goes 0 for 6, but just get downhill. You got to have your guards make those decisions. I know Will and KJ are freshmen, but time after time they kept settling. And I'm wondering, what's Brad doing? Where's he at? Like he said towards the end of the game, we couldn't stop it. Well, that's your job. And he put it on himself. But at the same time, Derek, I wanted a timeout and tell KJ or Kylan or whoever, if you don't get downhill here, I'm pulling you out. And in hindsight, he says he should have played Draven Gibbs-Lawhorn more to get to the rim. Listen, I kind of liked the rotation they were settling on, given what they had done the first 100 minutes offensively with those guys. But at some point, I would have just screamed at those guys, if you don't get downhill and try to get fouled or create for somebody, I'm pulling you. And I never saw that. I never saw that from the coach.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I asked Brad, who wears that onus of being able to make a change when you feel like you're taking the easy way out. Now they missed some what would be viewed in a vacuum as quality looks from three, but you said it. I mean, they had gone from making 4 of their first 8, and then I know in the first half, what were they, 1 for 16 or something like that? I mean, they really had a brutal stretch there from about the midway in the first half all the way down the stretch. So when that compounds and you can just continue to miss from three, it just feels like insanity to keep chucking those up. And I feel like even as a player, it just can't be like, all right, we'll just keep doing the same thing, and eventually they're going to go in. But and you brought up a good point as far as being in the bonus and just not being able to get to the free throw line, and that's something that you should be able to. Really good teams a lot of times have that guy who, when you're on the wrong side of a run or whatever it might be, and you need a momentum shift or just to buy some points, to buy a chance to, and that actually was something that Illinois could have done in the middle of that stretch. Tommy got fouled on a loose ball, 1-and-1, goes to the line and he misses it. He had a brutal night, and
Brutal.
But yes, Will downhill. KJ had 1 assist in the second half. Will was doing a lot of the work in terms of productivity, setting guys up.
KJ had 1 for the game.
Yeah, okay, 1 for the game. And Will found Merez on 3 straight within a 2-minute stretch early in the second half. Some of them were kind of like a little bit dangerous through traffic passes that Merez just corralled and wouldn't be denied. And whether that's, an emphasized thing in terms of downhill, a play design, something to get the ball going to the hoop. I do think it hurts that, when Tommy's not playing well at all, that takes away a big thing. Kylan was a complete non-factor offensively.
0 points, 0 for 2 shooting.
He's been so hesitant now, and I appreciate that he's deferring to the guys who are more featured, and Will has become that secondary playmaker that we thought maybe Kylan could be, and but he's got to do more. And
I kind of remind you last year of Arizona, right? Like he kind of disappeared there late.
Yeah, for sure. So this has been a theme where, although of late they've shot the 3 a lot better, but there has been the constant conversation of, do they rely too much on the 3? What can you do when that's not falling? How do you get downhill action continuously? And they had to prove it. Even they did against Minnesota, and we kind of went into this week like, all right, how do they do against really good defenses? They passed the test against UCLA. They didn't pass the test on the whole tonight. But I don't think it's all about offense, because the defense has just been, the freedom that Michigan State had to go downhill with their guards was just over and over and over again. Kohler does what he does. Yes, he plays a little bit out of characteristic from 3, but Illinois has lost now some of these gambles. We're like, hey, we're just going to let guys take a couple of looks, and he buried them.
Yeah, the guys that they, kind of play the scouting report by, they seem to get hot all the time. Like they're so open, Derek. They're wide open, right? These aren't even getting contested. So like that's a concern. It seems like it's a thing that's happening over and over again. Even the Minnesota guy, right, had 4 threes. That was a career high. It just keeps kind of happening over and over again. Arkansas made, or was it Alabama? Grant Nelson went off for a bunch of threes early in that game and really put you behind. But yeah, defensively, man, this team has lost a lot of bite. We're sitting there at 12-3 going, this team's a lot tougher. They were number 4 defensive efficiency in the country at that point. I know you ran the numbers before the game, Derek. I just ran them again. Since January 19th, they're number 105 in the country in defensive efficiency. And given that they're a Big Ten team, that's ridiculous. That side of the court is really concerning. And it's like last year, only you don't have the offensive efficiency that you had last year. So what has happened on that defensive end? Because those guards were getting wherever they wanted, and those bigs were just bullying Illinois. 14 offensive rebounds tonight. Perez only had 5 rebounds. How many Tommy end up with? 7, but it felt like all of those were late as Michigan State finally missed some shots. But Illinois lost the rebound battle, 41-36, and this team needs to win that rebound battle, even against a team like Michigan State.
Yeah, and I ran the numbers, really the turning point, about 8 minutes to go in that first half, and Illinois is up 16 points. From that point forward, as we know, they cut it to 4 by halftime and really just set the tone for Michigan State having a pretty darn good night offensively, where they've really been struggling here of late. From that point forward, they shot 54% from the field and got back half of their misses. Like that is a terrible formula against, again, a team that isn't – they're not very dynamic offensively. They don't have a guy that you fear up and down their lineup. Jace Richardson's had a couple of games, but Kohler.
Trey Holloman's a killer against Illinois. He just gets where he wants.
Yeah, Carr attacking baseline and those type of things. Illinois doesn't do themselves favors on a couple of the turnovers. You had the points off turnover stat earlier in the game. In the first half, that was a big theme for Illinois that was hurting them. But yeah, I think I'd like to go back and look at this, but one thing that was pointed out by some fans, and I noticed it too, is you're facing a Michigan State team that's towards the bottom of the country in 3-point makes per game, and we saw Indiana zone them in that last matchup, and that's how they beat them. They just said, hey, we're going to play zone, and if you guys want to shoot threes, I think we're going to win. But kind of like pressing up so far on the perimeter and then chasing downhill to their guards, like that was something that just – seemed like you were giving them an easy out. You weren't staying in front of their guards. You were giving them downhill momentum. Tommy wasn't being a backstop presence that was denying a whole lot. Perez was incredible on a couple blocks, but that was something that stood out to me. And within that, Kylan, to go back to him, and I don't want to rag on him because there's a lot of guys that have responsibility here. He hasn't been a lockdown defender for a month or so. So that's something that has stood out here in recent weeks that has played into a defense that's been too easy to score on.
The other thing we got to look at, Michigan State goes 10-11 deep. Illinois, went 8 deep tonight. Really 7 because Dre Gibbs-Walhorn played 3 minutes in this game, and it did feel like, now you'd think more in hindsight, like this should be a game that Draven Gibbs-Walhorn should play more against this smaller Michigan State team with all these guards. They were tacking you downhill. I'm surprised Brad didn't go to that at some point. I'm not surprised Trey White hasn't played much, right? Like Jake Davis has given good minutes, 8 points tonight. He battles. He can get attacked defensively, of course. But I know Ben Hilmerkus didn't make shots tonight, but like your bigger lineup did cause issues early in that game. And I do like him in the mid-range right now. He's just got to make some freaking threes. But at least he's rebounding. But I'm not surprised about that. Should they have gone more? Do you need to get Dre and Trey back into this rotation, Derek, to deepen it and give you something different that when you go on these lows, those are 2 guys who can't attack the rim.
No doubt. I definitely would have liked to see more of Dre. I think it's a guy that I don't know where he's at in terms of fully healthy coming off having the flu. It's been now, Minnesota was last weekend. So he's had a week to get through it. And he played a couple of minutes the other night against UCLA. So I definitely like to see him a little bit more because he does consistently be able to attack off the dribble, and I think he can stay in front of some guys defensively, although he's not perfect as far as that goes either.
Fouls a lot.
Fouls a lot on the perimeter. Trey
But he
White,
gives you energy, right? I mean, Dre gives you energy at least.
Yeah, no doubt. And if speaking of like messaging in a huddle, like I feel like if Brad told DGL when you get the ball, go to the basket, like you're getting that out of him. Like I think you're pretty much getting that regardless, because he has that confidence and he's looking for those opportunities. So
he can get tunnel vision to his benefit and detriment at times. Yeah,
a little bit. But when you've got Carson Cooper and Kohler on the back end, like Zapala, this is not a Michigan State front line that I'm worried about driving into a whole lot. Add that to it. I know it's a good defense on the whole, and yeah, maybe Cohen Carr comes over for help side or whatever it might be, and that's a freak athlete right there, man. But with Trey, I don't really know what you're missing. We haven't seen him in a while. I mean, other than 20 seconds at Minnesota. I know he was productive at Nebraska the last time he really played meaningful minutes, 8 points, 13 rebounds, a couple blocks. Haven't really known him to be someone that takes primary assignments defensively, offensively. He can be a slasher, but he's real hot and cold. When he's going, he's productive on the glass, and he can slash to the basket and those type of things. Other times he can be a little bit of a ball stopper. He'll take some mid-range shots. And again, defensively, I don't know what you're really getting out of him. So Jake, because of the three-point shooting, and he finally kind of stopped hiding his cards in the last press conference before this game. It was like, we're going to play the best players. And he's even said after UCLA, the best players for us right now. After UCLA to you, when you asked about the rotation, it's shooting is kind of one of the differentiators. Jake Davis is making threes, and Trey's 4 for 24 from three in Big Ten play. So he's not Ty, but he's, in terms of, just won't even try one, but he's not making them when he does.
Yeah, now you start pretty scary week, Derek. I mean, if you would have won this game, you would have thought, man, look at the opportunities in front of us. I mean, now you're looking at Wisconsin, one of the hottest teams in the country. They've won 12 of 14 since you beat them, and they are shooting the lights out. I mean, if you want not defend, Wisconsin's going to run you out of Kohl Center, which Illinois got 9-game win streak, 4 straight at Kohl Center. Boy, they better be ready to defend, because those guards are getting downhill. They're big body guards, and they can shoot it from everywhere. Winter's become like a star for them. Tanjay really is making a push for Big Ten Player of the Year. Like I still think it's going to be Braden Smith, but like he's making a push for that. And Greg Gard doing what he does, lowers expectations, and then he exceeds it to win Coach of the Year. He's right in that race with Dusty May right now at Michigan. So Wisconsin's fighting for a Big Ten title. It's a huge game for them. And after Wisconsin, you go to New York City and play one of the best teams in the country in Duke, and that massive front line and all those lottery picks, and of course Cooper Flagg. Huge week for Illinois, because they are slipping down the seed line. It was a nice 2 games, good win over UCLA. And if you get one of these games, you feel decent, but like it's just hard to trust this team, Derek. Like you don't know what you're going to get. It's a lot like 2 years ago. Like they can look awesome. First 10 minutes tonight, it looked like they were going to run Michigan State out of this gym. They were going to come on this podcast and talk about, hey, this team can make a run to like a 3 or 4 seed here. And now it's like this team gets in the tournament, you no idea what you're going to get.
No doubt. Yeah, prior to the UCLA game, it was like 6 seed, 7 seed with the arrow pointing down, depending on where you were looking, whether it was a 6 or a 7. You win that game, and then you're trending back towards that 5, it felt like, especially if you get tonight. Now I think this keeps you in 6 range. If you drop both this upcoming week, then yeah, obviously you could find your way. If you lose both those games, you lose at Michigan, which will be insanely tough, especially if you lose against Purdue, however that might go. I mean, the 8-9 game is a very real possible landing spot here. And that would be terrifying and really disappointing for a team that we know has, you were talking 2 or 3 seed at the beginning of January, and then had a favorable stretch theoretically right after that to take care of business. I think the missed opportunities at home are killer. And that will really, you lose at Nebraska, that's disappointing. You lose at Rutgers. You get hammered by 21 here against Maryland. Yes, Tommy's out, but we talked about that. The USC game, yes, KJ's out, and then this one. So I something that I've come upon recently that I found interesting. Their net ranking's still been pretty healthy throughout this. Their Ken Palm, their net, their metrics as far as that goes have been top 15, even though their record doesn't. They fell out of the AP top 25. No one was arguing with it. They lost at Rutgers. Their strength of record on Bart Torvik going into tonight was like 35th. So admittedly, I knew that. I'm familiar with that stat in football. I'm not as familiar with it in basketball. It makes sense, though. And I think
at some point you got to win games, right?
Yeah.
Like we can talk about all the metrics, but the NCAA tournament committee's not going to put them as a 4 seed because they're 15th in the net. They're going to look at it like, hey, they're 20 and, or if they even get there, like they'd be 20 and 12 or 20 and 13 or something like that going into the tournament. It's like, yeah, that looks like a 8 or 9 seed.
Yep. No doubt. That's part of where you're getting to. Ken Palm right now projects them at 19 and 12. Would have a chance, of course, Big Ten tournament to add a win or more there. But that's something that I do come back to now is that the net has looked really good. And even after some losses, you're like, oh, man, that's not a good loss. Or, yeah, it was quad one, but it was ugly as far as Maryland goes or Nebraska. But you do just have to – you got to increase the number of wins in total. The quad one wins, they're fine. I mean, they've 7 quad one wins is pretty good. It's not great. It's good. But they got to make up for some of their lapses. And tonight was one that you really, not to harp on it, but it feels like the best programs just thrive at home in big games. And I'm not knocking what Illinois has been the last few years. It's been a really, really good program. They've done great things. But they've left a real unsatisfying feeling in this spot. And it's been something that's been recurring. So
the best they were at home was, well, and they even lost the game here, was COVID year, right? When it was like 150 of us and they dominated at home, but Maryland won. Did Ohio State win here? I can't remember.
Ohio State and Maryland won back-to-back in this building.
And then they won out from there. But yeah.
And they've had some good wins, like the Iowa wins at the end of the 1920 year, at the end of the 21-22 year. That was a ranked Iowa team both times. The Wisconsin win here actually looks – I tweeted about that's darn near a quad 1A win. Quad 1A is top 15 at home. And
they're 9 in the Ken Palm right now.
Yeah, so I don't want to just brush over that one. That's a really good win. But, yeah, AP top 15. It's 2 and 6. 2 and 6.
All right, let's get to some of the super chats here. Def, I'd like to thank Brad for coming out to State Farm Center tonight to watch a Big Ten coaching milestone. Yeah, kudos to Tom Izzo, 354 wins. He passes up Bob Knight for career conference wins. He's a legend, man. And listen, I doubted what he was doing, right? And look at this. This is a typical Tom Izzo team. I am not overly impressed with there's not a star on this team. Jace Richardson could be a first-round draft pick. He had 11 points tonight. He was solid in the mid-range, but it's just a good team. And it's a total Tom Izzo toughness. We're better than the sum of the sum is better than the parts, right? So kudos to him because he has not gone to the portal that much, and he's kind of built this team from within. And wouldn't shock me if he gets this team to a Sweet 16, even though when I look at him, I'm just like, this team doesn't overly impress me. But there they are, 20-5, 11-3 in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no doubt. And it is credit to him for doing it his way. And we've seen Matt Painter do it his way to a lot of success. Tom's obviously been much more rocky in comparison to what he set the standard to be there at Michigan State. They've been more of a 500 Big Ten team than a top tier Big Ten team recently. Obviously, that's changed this year. But they do have the Tom Izzo calling cards. They're great on the glass. They're a very good defensive team. And this team is probably more athletic than some of his more recent teams. While Tyson Walker was a guy you actually feared. I mentioned earlier, you don't really maybe have that score, that offensive player that you're afraid of getting going, getting cooking. But, between Cohen Carr and Fears, and they got a couple of guys, they got speed, they got a high flyer in Carr.
Just really solid guard play, right? Howman's a nice player. Obviously, Fears has his good nights. Akins can get downhill. Not a lot of great shooters, but they're just solid guards in that backcourt, and then just big, tough guys.
Yep,
they do.
Yeah, I could make the argument, which I will briefly, that you maybe are sacrificing some of us. I don't think their ceiling's all that high. Now, Izzo's been to so many Final Fours, and he's done so at times where he was a 7 seed. So, he's done this before, but man, what a splash get at the 5 in the portal would do for this group. Like have the rest of the pieces, and then have like a 5-man who's not from Longwood, who plays 15 minutes a night and doesn't do a whole lot of anything. So
or some stud wing, right? Like if they Akins is a good player, but like he's not a stud. Like Michigan State can go get one if they wanted to, but yeah, he didn't do that.
But yeah, but there is preferences on what you're going to have. Culture is still something that matters. Collective.
He's going out his way. He's going out his way, man.
Yeah. And even right now, again, I think the ceiling is something that is capping, but how much he is comfortable not probably dealing with a whole lot of internal stuff and frustrations in comparison to some other coaches like Bill Self with AJ Storr and whatnot, and what's gone on there in terms of them not living up to the hype, and some different examples in contrast. So they've had a good year. They've won, prior to, we could argue at USC, or definitely the Indiana game. They've won a lot of the games they were supposed to win. This was not one of those, but they went and got it, and that's good for their profile.
Def, $4.99 super chat. Thanks, Def. Jeremy, leave Brad alone on not calling a timeout to even try to settle his team. Maybe those 2 timeouts he left on the board will carry over. Piper, am I wrong? I want to see some vintage Brad Underwood on this team? I want to see, and maybe it's histrionics. Maybe it's just we don't see what he does in practice, because I'm sure he goes off on those guys. I know the players have talked about that a little bit. I just like to see in game go off, or in a press conference say like, we're soft. Like we just haven't heard that. Like I just haven't seen that from Brad. And I'm wondering why, because it's a young team. Is he thinking about trying to keep some of these guys for next year? Like all those things. I'm just wondering, because it's just we haven't seen publicly, in State Farm Center and in the press conferences as much of that red ass Brad Underwood.
I agree with you. I definitely agree with it, and I've been waiting at different points to. I thought the Rutgers. I was out there at Piscataway, and they let a not very good Rutgers team who's been bad offensively score 82 points and beat them up on the glass. And I thought he was going to go in the press conference. They were soft, and he didn't. He's used availability and not being whole and everything, which has been valid points. You can't use that tonight. Obviously, you had your full allotment of roster. It is an interesting contrast. You got Terrence in the building tonight, and you remember back into the 22-23 season, the fart noise. I do think we saw some of their struggle to figure it out in that season. It became so public, and it became so under a microscope because everything was talked about. And Meyer would say stuff into the mic, which you wouldn't want a player probably to do. And it's, again, like it went on stuff on social media. It all became this circus. And I wonder if he has said, with a new team, with, I don't really have an established leader, carrying over from year to year, that I don't want to.
Which he chose.
Which
recruiting guys over Luke Goody and Ty Rodgers, right? Like, and hey,
sure.
They're more talented. The guys he's gotten are more talented, but you are clearly missing a leader right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I'm a tad surprised that he hasn't done it, but I do understand if he's like, I don't maybe have that leader to put up the shield and keep the guys together. You got young guys, I think that's why he hasn't been as publicly maybe hard on KJ when he's had the turnover. I mean, he's an 18-year-old, and you've only known him for 7 months or whatever the number is at this point. So there's some of that too. But I think a lot of people would probably more so look at some of the in-game decisions or adjustments, just being able to get different results or having counters to address things that aren't working. But I do think, you see some of their efforts and some of their battles on the glass, or just in general, there's questions sometimes, are they tough enough? And I thought I knew that answer in early to mid-January, and now I don't. Now I don't feel like they're there.
SRQ 5150 $5 super chat. Every time this team falls in love with shooting threes, they lose. I love Underwood, but this falls on him allowing it. So tired of this. Yeah, and I asked him, like, was there any similarities with the UCLA game? He said, no, we're trying not to lose in UCLA, and this one we just weren't tough enough. So I asked also, like, what do you have to do as a coach? You have to call a timeout? You have to change something? And, he said, well, that's on me to figure out, basically. And there's going to be a lot of thinking about that, right? I mean, just so many of these games you've just kind of let slip away. I mean, UCLA, you're fortunate you didn't let that one slip away. So these end game situations, I know they're young. I know KJ and Will Riley have the ball in their hands, and they're forcing up some of these tough shots. Part of that's on them being young, but it's also the coach's job to make sure that they can learn from those things. It just feels like this team really isn't learning from some of those things.
They're not trustworthy. They're not composed. They're not making good decisions late in those games. And tonight's another example, like, to not drive the ball, to not get out of settling from three, to not make some of the stops defensively, to corral some rebounds. And I know that, again, like, just how alarming 8.5 minutes is without scoring it can be. And you can't win a game that way, obviously, but you still allowed Michigan State to be productive offensively and to go on the run that was, and to end up being a 1 point. I know some people don't get into the analytics, but 1.23 points per possession is really good. That's like almost elite level offense for a team that has, couldn't put up 70 in their 3 losses before this: Indiana, UCLA, and USC. So that's something that goes into late game is getting the required stops. They didn't do that against UCLA. UCLA scores 53 points in the second half. And yes, Bilodeau went nuts, but I go back to KJ hits that fall away shot that he hit, which was like a prayer shot that goes in, which, credit to him for making that. Take some balls to take a shot like that, make a shot like that.
Well, he had to. There was 2 seconds on the shot clock.
Yeah, right.
He basically got thrown the ball with 5 seconds. Like, hey, KJ, save us.
Fair enough. Yeah, the hero shot. That's the grenade that you get ultimately. And then Sky Clark comes down. He's wide open from three. A guy that was 42% from three during their winning streak. And he's wide open, and he makes it. And no, it wasn't enough for UCLA to pull it out, but that's a play that gets you beat. The Tennessee end-to-end that happened here with Jordan Gainey can't happen. And this team's
this ain't the only time they have blown games late in the game.
We can go on and on. I mean, Northwestern cost them, it burned them. Tennessee, it cost them, it burned them. UCLA could have. Washington, they let Washington come all the way back from down 16 or whatever it was and tie the game. And Trey White throws the inbounds pass that leads to the easy layup for them to tie the game. KJ saves them there. They blow a 10 or 11-point lead in bragging rights in like 2 minutes. Nebraska, like, they're lucky that it's not uglier than it has been in terms of the win-loss in closing time. It's been really alarming. It's been a theme that has been there, and tonight's another example.
So the other night, we sat there and we got to wax poetic and remember Kofi Coburn's career. That's why this stinks, man. 1, you lost the game, and then 2, to have that mishap with Terrence Shannon Jr. Like, somebody had one job. And they did it the other day with Kofi. And to not double-check that, to not triple-check that. Josh Whitman said he had some very strong conversations with those people. And it's just embarrassing. It was just an embarrassing moment for what should have been a phenomenal just moment for Terrence Shannon Jr. in his career. When he unfurls that and it drapes down and you see it's upside down, it's like, are you freaking kidding me? And I know Whitman was thinking, I know everybody here was thinking it. Just a costly mistake. And as Josh said, it can't happen. Like, you can make mistakes, but that one can't happen. So at Mars was a great honor for what is one of the best players we've seen here, Derek. And we've seen some good ones with Kofi and Io here recently, but no one had a better season in a Illini uniform, in my opinion, than Terrence Shannon Jr. What he did during that, especially that postseason run, the beginning of the season, we think of the bragging rights game, and then what happened between those two things for the allegations, for the arrests, for the suspension, to overturn that, all of it. And then he goes through and gets the rust off and just goes on one of the most dominant stretches in college basketball history to lead Illinois to an Elite Eight. It was special, man. And he took my breath away several times during the season. especially that poke away steal against Iowa State and slam. But what we saw in Minneapolis, what we saw in Omaha, what we saw in Boston, I'll never forget. It was an unbelievable performance. And then you put on top of it everything he was dealing with. So I know what happened tonight, but I do want to sit here and talk about Terrence Shannon Jr., one of the best players in Illinois history, even if he was only here for 2 years.
No doubt. And I think it obviously doesn't spoil everything around this event. Now, the problem is you're building up to, because it's a jersey in the rafters moment, and the jersey itself is upside down. So that can't be the thing that's wrong about this, obviously. But not to belabor that point, the crowd turnout was phenomenal, and the video was awesome, and his family's here, and Tim Anderson's back sitting next to him on the baseline, and which is interesting, but not unexpected. Obviously, that's his guy.
Still on leave, Tim Anderson.
Still on leave, yeah. But for Terrence that season, he meant so much. We talked so much about carrying the torch for Illinois, and it was Io on to Trent and Kofi after he left, which they were part of the torch carrying in the first place, but passing that off to the next wave and whatever that was going to look like. And they identified Terrence as a high upside player, a kid from the state, connections to TA. They recruited, the full staff recruited him in high school, and he blossomed here. He was a really nice piece at Texas Tech. He wasn't a star player. He wasn't a number one option. He was a slashing wing that played good defense, didn't shoot the three very well, didn't have a lot of off the dribble game. And he grew his game here. His personality came out more. He became more of a leader, showed with his work ethic. I mean, the 5 a.m. workouts every day, the fact that I remember being on the road at an AAU event, and the coaches are sitting around talking like, they're like mad at him. We can't get him to take a day off in the summer. We're worried he's going to wear himself out because he's just, this can't be sustainable. This can't be something that, he can do over and over again. He was that determined to be his best, to lead the team, to get to the NBA. And obviously he accomplished all those things. And to persevere through what would have been an unimaginable roadblock in the middle of that season, and to have to drive back to Lawrence to turn yourself in to be arrested, and know what the news was going to come out, and how the reaction was going to be, and what was going to be said to you. And then obviously what was ultimately said to you on the road. But even then, Jeremy, I was thinking back, I remember talking amongst ourselves, and look, we're no legal experts. We tried to become as much as we could be at that point in time, reading through court documents and whatever. Like, I didn't think there was any chance in hell that Colleen Lawless was going to give him an injunction. I thought this was done. This was over.
Thank goodness for the Bleacher Report mock drafts.
I guess.
That you sourced, yeah.
There was just no precedent for overturning that. And fortunately, it was, because we saw how the court case played out. We saw what last season meant to Illinois, what it meant to him. And I'm just thrilled for him. He deserves things to obviously go as right as possible. I know the jersey didn't go right, but the moment still I think was cool. Johnny Newton, one of the other guys here, was sensational. And he's starting to get opportunities with the T-Wolves. So I think it's great. But, yeah, it was unfortunate. Still amazing. What a treat for Brad and the program. And the last thing I'll say, for us to get to talk to Kofi again, get to talk to Terrence again. Yeah, that was awesome.
I don't know if he ever will, but I hope someday, he does let us in into what that was like. Because how he handled that was unbelievable. Can you imagine, Derek, that happening to you and playing basketball and being awesome at it, with all that going on with your future life all up in the air? It's unbelievable. It's even as they were going through it and you didn't know what was going to happen with that court case. I'm sitting there and you can't not but be in awe of him fighting through all those chants and performing like he did. And whether it was just compartmentalizing or whatever, it's just an unbelievable mental focus for him to battle through those things and to perform like he did, because most of us would have just folded in that, just being like, so angry about it, right? And kudos to him. He proclaimed his innocence from the start, and he defended it. Like, he could have settled. He could have settled for like a misdemeanor charge in this probably, and I think the Kansas DA probably would have taken that given the case that they had. So, and he fought, and he got his not guilty verdict. And now he's receiving all the things he should. And that now includes playing time, millions of dollars with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And he's going to be in the NBA for a long time because he belongs. He's showing that now. It's a Minnesota team that had a lot of veteran guards, and they're finally getting hurt a little bit. And he's showing he deserves playing time. So just an amazing mental focus and strength and toughness and all those things. And just a phenomenal basketball player who got a hell of a lot better here, Derek. Hell of a lot better here. And Brad Underwood, the staff, Tim Anderson, are certainly Fletch. He's talked about Fletch a lot, are really huge because this is an injury-prone guy too, and he was barely ever injured at Illinois.
Yeah, no doubt. And it was something that he was always physically very vertically explosive, and they made him more mobile. They made him more, he had back trouble that last year at Texas Tech that was a little bit of a red flag. What would that future look like? How much could they eradicate that? They did, and he was very durable. He was even more of a high level athlete, which helped him become one of the best defenders in the Big Ten his final year. And a lot of work into shooting, a lot of work into becoming a guy that can play on the ball and do some things decision making wise. You've seen some of his recent outings with the T-Wolves. They're letting him do some of that stuff, which is really cool. And can be a guy playing a ball screen, can be a guy that can drive a lane, collapse a defense, and find a shooter, find a cutter. And those are things that developed here at Illinois. But yeah, and then I know some people are mentioning in the super chat or in the chats, like the postseason was hands down just so dominant. I know the UConn game for everybody was bad, and he wasn't himself in that one, but
also a questionable strategy, just keep sending him at Donovan Clingan, but that's for another day.
Sending everybody at Donovan Clingan.
Also a 30-0 run that kind of felt like happened again tonight.
Man,
it's just like, what? Do something to stop this, please.
Yeah, but he was maybe one of one in terms of at Illinois. I know that I didn't get a chance. I know you're close to the same age as me. Didn't get a chance to see what the Flying Illini looked like. That seeming in terms of like the electricity above the rim. And I know that we were talking about it earlier today. It wasn't the highest vertical maybe we've ever seen, but the most power I can imagine. Throwing it down.
That left-hand tomahawk was that's his trademark.
Unbelievable. And a guy that, as soon as I don't know if anybody had benefited more around the country for like trying to get rid of the charge call in college basketball. That just became, you could not defend that dude, especially in the open court. So love it for him. It was a privilege to be able to watch him up close. And I know he'll continue to do a lot of great things for sure.
Yeah. Cubs fan 7, $5 super chat as we wrap this thing up. Underwood has had 3 All-Americans, a top 5 pick, and another first rounder this year. Doesn't have a ton of postseason success to show for it. He's got 2 Big Ten tournament titles and an Elite 8 run last year. I know 21 didn't go as you had hoped, and 22, I think they just ran into the wrong team in Houston. That was not good for them, but yeah, it's part of Brad's thing right here, and we'll see what happens with this team once they get to March. But no postseason success, not a ton of postseason success. I mean, Elite 8 run, 2 conference tournament titles, not a ton of teams with that. So there's been a little bit, but yes, NCAA tournament. If it doesn't go well for Brad, like there's gonna be more talk of that.
There will, yeah. One season going on a nice run, a really good run. Obviously, I mean the Elite 8 is nothing you scoff at, and at the doorstep of a Final Four, obviously. That seemingly, quieted a lot of people on that note. But now with this team's inconsistency and to be honest, I think this is probably a conversation for another day. I know it's getting late here, but because of the high expectations that Brad has put on this team and what he said about their ceiling, what he said about their talent, I think that fuels some of the fire of when they don't have the success and when they don't look like a team that's going to get there. which of course we never know until it actually happens. But I think that's maybe amplified some of the frustration or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I felt like the 21.
Can we bring our boy back? Can we bring our boy back? St. Dom. I totally agree with you. Brad has underachieved as Illinois coach. Listen, okay, guys. Okay, guys. You can have your qualms about Brad, and he deserves criticism. I think this season, especially the last month and a half, it's been a lot of that. He's always going to have to wear the 21 year, right? Remember where you came from. Remember that last year you went to an Elite Eight. Remember that you've been a 1 seed. You've won 2 Big Ten tournament titles. Remember where this program was 10 years ago. I know some people don't want to hear that anymore. Yes, he's raised the bar, but he has raised the bar, right? To where, Derek, like you're saying, he has set the expectation so high that you're expecting to be in the Big Ten title conversation every year. You're not with this team. That's disappointing. It's a young team, and that's disappointing because he has said that they are capable of doing those things. If they're a one-and-done NCAA tournament team, yes, that is a disappointment for this year. But let's not talk about him being underachieving as a coach here during his entire tenure. He's been an awesome coach here. He's got his flaws. He's not perfect. But let's cool it with that talk.
100%. Yeah, I think if we looked over the last 5 years, even if you just included his whole tenure here, he's, in terms of results, Matt Painter, Brad Underwood in the Big Ten, right? Like you can which I think is obviously a very fair reference point. Anything post
Greg Gard's close-ish, right there.
Close-ish.
Those have been 3 best coaches for the last 7-8 years in the Big Ten, especially the last 5-6.
Right. And not only where Illinois' been, look where a perennial powerhouse in Michigan State's been recently. And, some other programs would kill to be, Indiana would kill to be Illinois, over the last handful of for an Elite Eight.
Listen, I get it. You want to set the expectation that Final Fours and Big Ten titles, those things are really hard. Like, it's really hard to get those, and you just have to be in the battle every year, and Brad usually has them in the battle. You're making NCAA tournaments. You're competing for Big Ten championships. There's not a lot of teams that do that. Look at Michigan. They did for like 1 year under Juwan, and look how far that thing went downhill, and they get Dusty May, and now they're back up to it. So, like, I get it. You want to raise the bar, and just Final Fours every year. Illinois made 2 Final Fours, right? Like, they've made how many Elite Eights? 6, 7, 8, something like that.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's really hard.
It is hard, and the 2021 year is the 1 seed that didn't turn into even a second weekend is a huge blemish. The following year, when they won a Big Ten title and were a second round exit, I don't know how high the ceiling of that team really was. Like, I don't think that was a huge missed opportunity. I don't know how far that team was going, especially when it wasn't a full season of Andre Curbelo. Andre Curbelo was in and out of the lineup and nowhere near. And I don't want to go on a whole deep dive of this whole thing. Obviously, he's not been an underachieving coach. Illinois is very lucky to have Brad Underwood at right now. I know it doesn't feel like it tonight for a lot of fans after this result, but I think those that are questioning that are crazy in my opinion. And
I saw another comment. Brad's made 1 tournament run in 20 plus years of coaching. Brad's been a head coach for 10 years, 11 years. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm taking crazy pills.
We'll see. We'll see where this goes too. You can't, dry the ink on a top 5 pick and another first rounder this year and rope that into a lack of postseason success. Like, they could still do it this year. Yes, no, the recent.
I'm not betting on it, by the way.
I'm not betting on it either.
But they could. They could. I'm not like sitting there going to the tournament and be like, this team has no chance. It's just like the Matthew Meyer team. Like, if Matthew Meyer got hot, I think that team can go pretty far. If Will Riley and Casper Sakashonis get hot, team can beat somebody that's better than them.
Yeah. The last thing I'd say on it is I do want, what would people's reactions be if Brad, off the Elite Eight, assembles this roster and goes, look, guys, we'll be really talented. I don't know how good we'll be during the regular season, but what we want to do? We want to show up to the table in March and see what we got. People might be more, I don't know, instead of saying, national title, best roster I've ever had, Final Four. I'm not blaming Brad for setting those standards. If anything, I would blame a coach for deflecting against what should be high expectations at Illinois. But I think that might be part of like the reaction to every time it looks like this isn't an elite team or an elite program, whatever it might be, that people bring the pitchforks in the fire. I don't know.
I get it. It's a bad night, and
it's a terrible night.
They're going to be dooming, and I get it, but just don't be crazy about this. But I'm talking to fans, so I get it. You're going to react this way, but they got to figure this out, Derek. I mean, they won 3 of 5, if you want to look at it that way. They beat Ohio State at home. They beat UCLA at home. But now you go play 2 top 10 teams in the country now. Wisconsin, 9 in the Ken Palm, Duke, 2. Then you got Iowa, Michigan, Purdue. It's not easy in this final stretch. So we'll see what they got.
They got to figure it out. They got to be able to figure it out and fast. You hope that you could steal one next week. Wisconsin is seemingly the more gettable, although, man, that Wisconsin team that we watched today, if you saw the game, like you said, a top-notch offensive team that's shooting the cover off the ball from 3, and they'll be looking for some revenge in terms of the series on the whole, and just beat them here earlier this year too. So Kohl Center is always a really tough place to go play, and then Duke, and I don't know, it's scary. It is scary what
Duke's scary.
Duke's scary, but just this stretch is scary. This stretch is scary coming up.
Yeah, and you wonder if it like this. I don't know. Like the next 2 games, does this team play like it's got nothing to lose? Maybe that helps them. But these are 2 really good teams. Illinois just got to be smarter. Got to play smarter.
No doubt. By the way, I don't know why my camera keeps shifting every 5 minutes. My angles.
You got some.
I've been zoomed in, zoomed out. I'm not moving my screen, but it's just the way things are going tonight at State Farm Center.
All right, I got nothing else. Probably shouldn't even address some of the doomers, but figured I would.
It's good.
They're supporting us. They're watching us. We appreciate you guys. All right. That'll do it for us here at State Farm Center on a no good, very good night. And I don't know if this podcast made anybody feel any better about anything, but hey, we're here for you. Thank you to everyone watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, hit that notifications bell. And if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you follow us, rate us, review us, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll have plenty more at Illini Inquirer coming up after this one, more football content as well. If you want to escape into a different sport. I wrote a story on the Wisconsin transfers. Joey's got a story on the Clement brothers coming up as well. So stay tuned to all that at IlliniInquirer.com. For Derek Piper, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.